You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 64. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how to stop over drinking in 90 days without missing out on life. If you're not an alcoholic, but fed up with saying yes to a drink when you mean to say no, you're in the right place. Hi everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Now today I want to talk about belief. Now, for all of you out there who might be rolling your eyes at the moment, those of you who like the action, like the tactics, like the tips, the tricks, the hacks and all that stuff, well, I want you to listen up, because this podcast alone will change your life. Belief is so important to you as you will go about affecting the transformation and changing your relationship with alcohol. So it's not a load of old woo. It really, really is important. And to actually get this off onto a sound footing, I want to talk about the Pareto principle, or you might know of it as the 80-20 rule. Now, as I often talk about, I used to be a corporate girl. I worked in large corporations, Fortune 500 company for years and years and years. Had a very big job, the whole 9 yards. And that involved a lot of annual planning, a lot of quarterly reviews, the ops reviews, a lot of analysis, a lot of poring over results and seeing how we could do better. A lot of slicing and dicing the data. We had whole departments that would be churning out data for us to look at and analyze, figure out what we could do better. Now, the really interesting thing in terms of stepping back, and actually we saw it at the time, but I can see even more clearly now, is that time and time again, Pareto's principle came into play. The 80-20 rule, and it would show up. So here's a few examples of the types of things I used to see. 80% of the revenue we got came from 20% of our customers. Now, that was really obviously important, because then if we could identify, by being able to identify that 20% of the customers, we could then look at how we could basically double down and support them more, right? So that would drive even more revenue. Now, for a while, I was also involved in resellers, in working with the reseller accounts. And there we again saw that 80% of the revenue from the resellers, from the third-party networks, came from just 20% of the reseller partners. And this was really interesting information, because it actually meant that we could use it to strip back the number of resellers that we were supporting, right? There was no point supporting all these resellers over here if their revenue was far less, because effectively it was costing us the same amount to support each reseller. When it came to working with external suppliers, we would often find that 80% of mistakes that we were getting in from them came from 20% of the vendors, right? And that was useful information. We could take that and then determine which ones we wanted to drop and who we wanted to continue working with. Now, those are 3 examples that I've taken from the business world. But time and again, I see this 80-20 rule showing up in my life. And I was thinking about it a lot when preparing for this episode, because the thing that struck me was that of all the things that you can do, or that I did and that I support my clients with in changing their relationship with alcohol, belief in your ability to change and belief in the possibility of a different future for you are right up there. They are near the top of the pile in terms of what is important. And if you were to ask me to strip back 80% of the tactics and actions and strategies that are given for changing your relationship with alcohol, working on your belief would be there in the remaining 20%. It is not something I will cut. It is that essential. In fact, it's probably the one thing that I would never want to remove. Yes, my friends, belief is that important. Now, what I am not saying is that to stop over drinking, all you have to do is sit there and chant to yourself, I believe in me, I believe in me. I'm not talking here about repeating positive thinking and sort of positive la 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 mantras and things. Of course not. We have to take action. We have to take massive action to achieve our goals. We have to take repeated action over and over and over again when it comes to changing what we do around alcohol. Now, there are so many tips and tricks you can deploy in this area, and I absolutely find value in these. In fact, I teach a lot of them too, right? Show me a hack that I can use successfully, and I'm there. There are many, many hows. How to do this, how to do that. In fact, read any article on learning how to drink less, or spend any time in many of the Facebook groups, and you'll find loads of hows. I mean, loads and loads of them. Do this, do that, do this, do that. And that's great, right? But here's the thing. All the best tips and tricks in the world are going to be of limited impact if you don't have belief. It's a little bit like learning how to cook the tastiest food in the world, right? Really learning how to bring out the flavor in carrots, how to cook a moist turkey, always a challenge I find. And it's about learning, imagine learning how to bake the crispiest of crisp roast potatoes, and then not having plates to serve them on, and not having guests to serve the food to, right? All of this detail and focus on actually how you go about doing the preparation of the food is almost pointless without the larger picture. Another way of looking at it, specifically around drinking, is having a tactic and learning how to manage a work stew, right? For instance, by perhaps having the tactic of always having a glass in your hand so you won't get pushed into having another. Now that's, a small tactic to get you through the evening. But understanding how the person you're becoming would handle the same event and stepping into their shoes, that's another way of approaching it. And that's the area where belief comes to the fore. So I want to offer that you start from the position of belief. Focus 80% of your energies on that. How do I do this? I hear you saying, right? There's that how question again. Now, I'll come to that in a moment. But first, I want to talk about why belief is so important. Because when we nail the why as to why it's so important, the how will just fall into place. So here are two great reasons why belief is so important. Firstly, no reason other than thinking in this way serves you. Just think about it. If you're going to take an action, any action, this doesn't apply exclusively to drinking. And if you're going to say to yourself, well, this isn't going to work, think about how your experience is going to be. Right? You're taking action, but you're kind of sort of waiting for all things to fall apart and for you to not get the result you desire. Now consider that same scenario where you're saying to yourself, well, it's possible that this will work. Now, you're not even guaranteeing the results to yourself, right? And that's okay. You're just for the moment believing it's possible that something will come out of this. And whether you achieve the result or not, the experience is going to be so different because guess what? You're going to learn something. It's about taking the same action but fueling it from a different place of belief. Now, I had this happen last Christmas. Let me tell you this little example from the non-drinking world, right? Now, I love baking, and every year I make a Christmas cake. I'm not really that practical, but, I can bake. But when it comes to the icing, that's another matter entirely, right? I love the way these beautifully iced Christmas cakes look. Now, I grew up with the story that I'm a bit cack-handed, and I hope that translates. But it basically means I can be a bit clumsy. And that was a story I ascribed to for years. And, well, part of that got translated in I'm not very good at icing cakes into I can't get a smooth finish. Now, and this was reinforced by the fact that when I was growing up, my dad would always ice our family cake. Now, he's a plasterer by trade and has therefore a skill that translates well into icing, right? So when I fast forward, I was grown up and I would bake the cake and I'd want to do a smooth finish and I'd have this story, well, I'm not as good as my dad. I don't have my dad's steady hand. I don't have his training and the practice, and it's not going to look great. It's going to be a waste of effort. I'm going to spoil this lovely, tasty cake. So for year after year, I would just buy fondant icing and that was it, right? I just wouldn't even really try. But this past year, I did the royal icing thing, right? I made the icing. I marzipan the cake and I did the icing. What I changed was my belief, right? I said to myself, I believe I can do this. I believe it's possible that this won't look terrible. And you know what? It wasn't a disaster. The only difference between any previous year when I've tried to ice a cake like that in that way and this last year was that I decided it was possible. I decided to believe. It was just one small mental shift and it made all the difference. The other reason why believing makes so much of a change is that we never know we can do something until we do, right? If we try to change our drinking, we might talk about all the things we've tried, all the actions we've taken, all the failed starts, all the back to day one. We list all the reasons why we can't do it. But that just means that we just don't know yet what works for us. And we don't know what works until we find out, until we do it. And it's belief that fuels you to taking those steps again and again and again to get to the point where it works. This has been the case throughout history for every invention. We didn't know it was possible to build a cathedral until the first cathedral was built. We don't know we can drive until we do. I often think about this in terms of my husband and his pilot's license. And one of the things he had to do in order to qualify was he had to fly the airplane alone, right? You do your first solo before you get qualified. Now, he had done the requisite hours, but he didn't know he could actually really fly a plane and land it all by himself until he'd done it. Now, I have this thing about flying. I don't particularly enjoy it. And the way I look at flying is it's not like driving a car where if you're going along, you can just press the brake and stop and say, that's it, I'm not doing this. Once you're in the air, you are in the air. You are the one who has to land it. And there's pretty dire consequences if you don't. Now, you're going to have belief in your training, in the system, in your instructor, but you also need to have belief in yourself because you have to rely on yourself to do the action required. Now, doubtless you've done this many times in your life, right? You don't know you can do something until you've done it. So when it comes to changing your relationship with alcohol, I want you to get a jump start on yourself by feeding yourself with the belief that you can. You really can. And to extend this so that once you've done it once, whatever that thing is, whether it's to allow an urge, go to a party and just have a couple of drinks or whatever it is, that you can do it again and again and again so you don't chalk your success up to a fluke. Because that's what we often do as well. No. You just have to then switch your belief into believing you can repeat the success. Now, what I want to do next is I want to take you through a little exercise on believing new things. To believe a new thing about yourself and your drinking. And you can decide on whatever flavor of this you want, whether it's to believe you can quit drinking for good or that you can learn to just have a glass here or there, or maybe to believe that you're able to feel in control. Right, whatever it is for you, whatever it is that you want to start believing. So I want you to grab a sheet of paper, and obviously if you're in a car, if you're running, listening to this, you might have to replay and do this afterwards. But first, I want you to write down the new sentence that you want to believe in. For instance, I believe I can have a take it or leave it attitude to white wine. Right, so write down whatever sentence it is for you. Then I want you to look at how does that thought feel when you think it today. Come up with a couple of options of one-word feelings. And then I want you to ask why. Why do you feel that way? Look for any conflicting thoughts that you might come up with. This is when we get into the negative doubt, right? So we want to believe this thing and we maybe feel strong about it, but then no, you can't do that because of this, or this won't work, or you tried that, or blah, blah, blah. Well, what are those things? Write each of these internal objections out, conflicting thoughts out as a separate item. All the reasons why it's not going to be possible, right? All the reasons why it's not possible for you to believe. And then I want you to take each of these in turn and answer them with an alternative thought and another massive action to counter it. Right? So if a conflicting thought, for instance, is that you always cave when a particular friend is in town, I want you to determine that how you're going to handle that and what action you will take the next time that friend's around. So you basically don't just let your brain offer you all these excuses as to why this isn't going to happen, but you double down on your belief by saying, okay, I'm going to tackle each of these, right? We're going to knock these all off. Next, I want you to pick just one of these alternative thoughts and actions that you are going to commit to go ahead on and to do, and then to evaluate what happened, learn from it, and repeat. Do that enough times, and that is how you start to see and make new beliefs really believable for yourself. And finally, here's a top tactic that helps you focus on growing your belief, right? It's beautiful as it's totally believable in the current moment, and also grows your belief in what you can achieve moving forward. It's simply to put the words "it's possible" at the start of any sentence. It's possible I can stick to my drink plan at the wedding this evening. It's possible for me to allow the urges, however uncomfortable they might feel in the moment. It's possible I can change my relationship with alcohol, even though all my family are heavy drinkers. So that's it for today. We've spoken about the importance of belief. And the beautiful thing is that by focusing on your belief, you're going to imbue your actions with a new sense of possibility, which in turn is going to make it much more likely that you'll back yourself to achieve your goals. So as you go about changing your relationship with alcohol, no matter how many fascinating and fun and quick and easy tips and tricks and hacks and all the rest of it that you've got, focus on belief. Spend 80% of your effort on your belief, and your actions will follow. You will get the results you desire. And if you want to see exactly what's possible for you in your life fast, then let's talk. We'll talk about where you currently are with your drinking and where you want to be. And on the call, which is free, I'll build the exact plan to get you there. This will open up the door to your new life. This will give you a sense of belief into what you are capable of. And my friend, it will just be the tip of the iceberg. It's so good. When you start to back yourself, start to believe in yourself, you really become unstoppable. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week. If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around, and they don't miss out on life. And we do it in 90 days. The effect is permanent. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.